So with that, I will open the floor to some questions if we have any. If we don't, I do have a little bonus round to maybe spur some additional questions if you want to go through that. So the chat box is open, and if anybody wants to type a question, I'll be more than happy to answer those online. Here's a question. What made you interested in this career path? So that's an interesting little anecdote. My father was a home builder in metropolitan Atlanta, where I grew up in the 1970s and early 1980s. And I grew up around construction. I was a small child, you know, standing up on the seat of a five-yard dump truck, riding around town and doing various things like that. And I told my father then that I wanted to do what he did. I wanted to build places. I wanted to build stuff. And he told me point blank, you shouldn't do this. You're too smart, kid. This is hard work. This is manual labor, and this is tough. You don't want to do this. You want to do something with your brain. And I said, oh, okay. I'm kind of disappointed. But as a 6-year-old, I started poking around, and I said, architecture. Architecture deals with all this stuff, and I told my father, standing on the seat, this is before seatbelts and car seats and all that stuff. Standing on the seat of a VW Bug while my father was driving down the freeway at 50 miles an hour, 55 miles an hour, which was the speed limit back then. And I said, I want to be an architect. I'm going to go to Georgia Tech. And he about drove the car into the woods. But that's what I did. I went to architecture school. After I was there for 2 years, I said, I really don't care where the bathroom goes. I care about how the city works, But I was ignorant. I didn't know that city planning existed. I thought we'd stop doing that because have you ever seen metropolitan Atlanta? Nobody planned any of that, did they? Actually, they did, unfortunately. It's a train wreck. So when I went back to school, studied city planning. Just sort of fell into it. It's been a wild ride ever since. Another question, what local suggestions do you think will be effective in helping to maintain the roads money-wise? Well, realistically, the state of Florida needs to raise the gas tax. That's number one. We have very, very, very serious environmental concerns in the state of Florida relative to sea level rise. Whether you believe in climate change or not, I'm not here to change your mind. I can tell you from scientific fact that the sea level is rising and has been rising for the past 100 years. It's rising very slowly right now. It's projected to accelerate, but even if it just rises very slowly, we have a lot of the state of Florida that's at extreme risk. We've got to change the way we do business. And part of that is really putting a price on the way that we currently live. It's expensive to travel by car. It's expensive for the public sector, for us to all, as private individuals, drive around in a car. And raising the gas tax is one of those things that we have the power to do. At the hyper-local level, at the level of an individual municipality like mine, where we know that we have to use property taxes to subsidize roadway maintenance, the greatest tool that we have is doing better land use planning, making sure that the development that does occur is the highest possible value. And that doesn't mean the highest possible price for a residence, but that does mean that the large lot detached single family home runs counter to that. So large lot single family homes may just be mansions in the future, and everybody may be living in more dense, smaller units because that's all we can afford. And that's certainly the pattern that we're seeing in most desirable urban locations in the United States of America. People are flocking to places where they don't have to spend 2 hours a day commuting in the car.
I have a question. How efficient does the districting affect areas? Like how by assigning districts, does that improve the efficiency of a community?
So it depends. It depends on how you structure those districts. In traditional zoning, Korean zoning is really born out of the desire to separate the messy industrial uses from the places where people live. So zoning in that regard is highly desirable. I mean, you wouldn't want, Lee County to build the next airport right next to, the mall and all the dense development that occurred there. A, it would be dangerous, and B, they already have one that's called Page Field, and they moved it to Southwest Florida International because they didn't want the planes flying. But it can be taken to extreme, just like we showed in that image we showed the example of the pods of development. You have to drive between those places. And you look at the typical development pattern in Florida in the post-World War II era, and it's built like a tree. You have a web of small streets that connect to a main trunk. So you're dumping all the traffic into one location. It's highly inefficient in terms of the entire economy, because goods and services can't get to where they're going for travel. So zoning, when taken to an extreme, can be very detrimental. Zoning is also an appropriate way, as long as you're looking at a fine enough grain, a fine enough detail, and connectivity. So, as with most things in planning, the incredibly unsatisfying answer is it depends. It's complicated. Just like good engineering, it's complicated. I can't do engineering. Anybody have any other questions?
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, this is about how you think zoning. There's been some studies that say that a lot of brick and mortar business, more people are going to be doing business from home. That is, like, office buildings are no longer going to be needed because we all have computers and collaborate via the internet.
So you're breaking up a little bit, but I think I know the main gist of your question. And yes, there in the past years, or 9 months now, what are we in? Since the beginning of this pandemic, I've actually been participating in a lot of continuing education courses about this very thing. And it's really accelerating trends that we had seen with the rise of e-commerce throughout the 21st century. So retail has been on its heels for almost 20 years now, realistically, from the development side. We're even like the International Shopping Center Association, they think that America is over retailed by 40 to 60%. And that's pre-pandemic numbers. So the commercial end of the equation is highly in flux right now. There was a lot of thought that offices were the savior. We see a lot of conversions of malls, shopping malls, into office-type uses. But those sectors, and the pandemic proves, and we're on a Zoom call right now, but 60% of American offices are doing this daily as their way of getting by through this process. How much of that isn't going to come back? How many firms are going to say, yeah, I can do with like 70, 80% less space because we just need a a fancy conference room for, you know, a big meeting every once in a while, or on all hands or something like that, instead of having a cube for every person and a parking space for every person. That consumes a tremendous amount of real estate and cost. So there's a lot of uncertainty in the commercial real estate market right now. Urban Land Institute is fast and furious thinking about that. The bright spots that they see in terms of these things, and this is trends that are going back over a decade now, is really experiential retail. So the retail where I have an experience. So Starbucks is an experience. I make a cup of coffee at my house. The reason I pay $5 for a cup of coffee or $6 for a cup of coffee at Starbucks is because it's an experience to go there and get, you know, hear the espresso machine and have the barista say hi to you. So experiential retail. And the experience of being in an exciting place. So a mixed-use environment, a traditional town, a main street, the high street shopping experience in a big city. Those places are still doing quite well. And rents per square foot and revenue per square foot is extremely high in those places. But the average American shopping center or shopping mall may be a dying animal because I can get everything I need on my computer or on my smartphone. You know, this is shop. You can't see it because it's the screen. This is the shopping mall of the future. You know? I mean, and then on the office end of things, there's still going to be the need for those office spaces that do require human interaction, like medical offices. Can we please get back to in-person learning? I'm having a lot of difficulty actually doing what you guys are doing, listening to a webinar, essentially, in my continuing education courses that I need for my professional credentials. You know, it's difficult for me to pay attention to a class like this. I'm sitting in front of my work computer and I'm like, oh, I could do this email real quick. What did they say? It's distracting. So, you know, there are certain things and certain types of people that really need that in-person environment. So I don't think offices are going away, but their shape, the quantity that we need, and the locations are certainly going to change. So that's going to have a big impact on how we build our cities moving into the future. Great question. Do we still have a few minutes? If we do, and there are no other questions, I have a little bonus round for us. So Florida Department of Transportation has been working diligently over the past few years on a Complete Streets program. They've updated their Florida Design Manual, which is the Bible for how roadways get developed. And that's based on context classification. You know, these two ideas. The Complete Streets policies for the Florida Department of Transportation go back almost a little over half a decade now with the adoption of a statewide Complete Streets policy. The Florida Design Manual was updated in 2018 based on a context classification system. And this is the official context classification system for the Florida Department of Transportation. Look familiar? We just saw this. This is the urban transect. Now they call it context instead of transect because the bureaucrats at FDOT were worried about talking about transsexualism instead of contextualism. So you have the natural realm. I'm pointing with my fingers. So, from the natural realm all the way to the urban core. So they really think right now, every district in the state of Florida is rapidly going through, and this process has been ongoing for about a year now, going through every state highway system and sort of block by block, mile by mile, assigning a context classifications to the highway system. And that's going to drive how they spend those federal and state transportation dollars moving into the future, and the shape of our roadways, and ultimately the shape of our communities. So that is something that's out there, and will have a huge impact on particularly the transportation side of engineering in the state of Florida over the coming decades. So if you're already moving in that direction in your professional careers, you're going to have to learn about the design manual, context classification, how the roadway fits within the community in a much more specific way than in the past. So with that, I will say thank you. And again, if there are any more questions, I'll be more than happy to answer those. But definitely thank you for your time and attention today.
Do you have any other questions?